Hello. This video is a lot more specific than I generally do. I want to highlight some of the systems in the works for navigation. These are all very much works in progress, but are broadly functional, and I'm interested in impressions. I find it's really easy to get sort of bogged down in the development side and lose track of what a player's perspective might be. My aim with navigation is for a kind of hybrid system, one that is complex enough and has enough realistic elements to it to feel satisfying when done correctly. But I'd also like to limit as much tedium as I can. I think there's always going to be a certain degree of that in a semi-realistic sailing game, but hopefully I can strike a kind of balance that works for most people. With that said, navigation in following seas can currently be broken down into two main types: celestial navigation and visible triangulation. And I'll go into both of those now. So, celestial navigation functions in following seas much the same way it does in reality. You have access to a quadrant, and you can use this to measure any fixed celestial point, like the North Star or Polaris, for example. We're in a pretty small numbered latitude here, so we can't see the full constellation, but using the quadrant and looking through it will allow you to see the constellations, and looking for Polaris, we can see it there. I do plan to make it maybe a bit clearer for people who aren't quite as familiar with how this works, as well as I will probably be shifting the game's main location a little bit more to the middle of the northern hemisphere, as right now you can't even see the whole constellation. But regardless, looking through the quadrant, the angle between that and the horizon is measured at around 8.3 degrees. And so using that number, you can go to the map table on whichever ship you're in, and it will allow you to use these map plotters either by entering the number or just using the slider, to set both your latitude and longitude. So in this case, we'd be moving our latitude to around 8.3. The sliders are a little imprecise, so I intend to improve that in some coming updates. But regardless, with our latitude set, the next step would be longitude. And longitude is something I'm definitely more interested in perspectives on, as it's a much more complex topic and a more difficult figure to get using real-world tools. Typically, you could have a chronometer with its time set to a reference number, like the prime meridian, for example. And then at your local solar noon, you could measure the difference between your local solar noon and the noon referenced on your chronometer. I worry that's maybe a bit overly complex for a game like this, so how I currently have it done is you simply have two clocks, one that displays the prime meridian time and one that displays your local time. And then it simply displays the time difference between the two without much, if any, intervention needed by the player. So there's not really a lot of gameplay involved there. It simply tells you what the difference is, in this case 177.86 minutes, which on a world-size object would result in a longitude of 44.46 degrees. So I'm not 100% happy with this. I don't want it to be too complex, but at the same time, I worry this is perhaps a little bit goofy or simplistic. So opinions are welcome. Regardless, with this display, we know our longitude is 44.46 degrees, and in much the same manner, we can use the plotters to display that number. It's a small map, so close enough. So the intersection of these 2 points would give us our current location. I've also added a pin system. These 2 buttons here will add and remove pins, and you can use this either to plot a desired course or to plot your actual course over time. So, for example, we have marked our current location and placing a pin there. If you then move the plotters, a line will be drawn from whatever point you entered as a reference, and you can do this as, well, not as many times as you want. There's a maximum of 10 pins, but you can use this to show a persistent track of where you have gone over time. So if you save and reload, these will retain their marked positions. And as well, for every marked pin, the total length of the defined plot will be shown. So for here, for example, from our originating point to here, here, and here, not including the final unmarked point, we've marked out a course of 25.24 knots. So obviously this map covers quite a small area, and that's primarily for the demo. The final game world will be quite a bit larger than that, but that's currently where it's at. So it's something that could definitely be iterated on a lot, and I'm interested on any thoughts that you might have. Next up, we have visible triangulation. The advantage of this system is it can be done at any time of day, so long as you have line of sight to any 2 points of interest and know what those points of interest are so that you can identify them on a map. The disadvantage is just that. You need to know what you're looking at, and you need to be able to see these points of interest. So if it is cloudy, or you're very far away from land, or it's foggy, which it is quite regularly in this part of the world, this might not be overly useful. And on a development side in particular, there is the challenge that currently the draw distance isn't that far for optimization reasons. So I'm working on a method to sort that out, even if it's just reducing things to billboards, basically, so that you can at least more or less see them at very long distances. Regardless, how this works is you would take out your handheld compass and look for an object that you recognize. Like, for example, here we have the Watcher at a bearing of 245.54. So knowing that, using the map, there are currently 2 functions added here for triangulation pins. And you would then, knowing the location, so we have the watcher right here, you could move the map plotter to the watcher, and clicking these triangular buttons here will place one of your reference points at that location. So clicking this, let's move these out of the way just so it's clearer, will add a line drawn from our reference point to the edge of the map. And this text box or slider will allow us to set the bearing. So, for example, we had 245. Let's get approximate. Like I mentioned in the prior section, these are a little imprecise right now. I'm working on that. But setting the bearing will draw the line in the reverse of whatever that bearing is. It should be essentially pointing straight at our vessel. And for triangulation to work, you need at least 2 reference points. Currently, you can only set 2 in the game, but I may add more, or more of a sort of arbitrary setup, so you can add as many as you want. But currently, it's just 2. So over here, we know that's Bathurst Isle, which is at a bearing of just about 185. Let's call it that. So in much the same way, we would set the plotters to our known landmark. And then set our bearing. Which would indicate our current position is approximately right around here, which is consistent with the points measured via celestial navigation in the prior segment. Of course, the more accurately you measure and the more precisely you actually enter the values, the more accurate it's going to be. This method may never be, especially with only 2 points, as accurate as celestial navigation, but especially on smaller maps such as this one, it can be quite accurate to indicate your position. So it's, again, very much an in-progress system, but I'm interested in any thoughts, both from people who have a greater understanding of navigation and perhaps players who don't, who may look at this and wonder if this is some sort of graphing calculator tool instead of a game. So yeah, I'm interested in perspectives. But anyway, I want to thank you for watching. I'll probably have a more typical video in the coming weeks. But until then, happy summer.